Hello, folks. We are live with a podcast for all seasons. This is the long-waited for Season 3, Episode 9. Today, me and Eric are going to be coming... Oh, my name's Josh Mundy, by the way. And with me always is my cohort, Eric Joseph. Say hi, Eric.
Hi. I wonder how loud that's going to come through over people's computers. It's good to be back. Josh and I have been away for a few weeks. It's the final day of September. If this were Raccoon City 1998, we'd be right in the midst of the events of Resident Evil 2. Actually, I think the final portion of Resident Evil 3 will be kicking off tonight if we're going by the timeline. But anyway, we're not going to get too sidetracked, but those who listen to this show know we geek out about Resident Evil every now and then. So today what we're doing is we are going to talk the first two episodes of Gotham Season 3 and then move on to discussing month 4 of DC Rebirth. Before we get into discussing Gotham, I just want to say that I myself will be discussing the show, not necessarily reviewing it per se, because I wrote a long review over at WeGotThisCovered.com. I'll say from the outset, I gave the show 4 out of 5 stars, so that would translate to an 8 out of 10 on our scale, or convert, I should say. So I just don't want this to be seen as a conflict of interest. So if you want to read my full review, and it's lengthy, my boss had to insert a page break, just search the TV review archives over at We Got This Covered, or Google Gotham Season 3 review, We Got This Covered. That should take you to it. Plus, the review is on Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic anyway, so you shouldn't have too hard of a time finding it. So what I'm going to do in a minute is turn it over to Josh, and he's going to start us off this time. Normally it's I that do that, so he's going to run down the finer points, what he thought, and I'll interject and discuss a little bit of what's going on in Season 3 so far, but technically Josh is going to be the only one giving a podcast for all seasons score to the show. So hopefully that's not too confusing, but I'm just playing it safe, as it were. So Josh, Gotham Season 3, go.
Season 3. So Gotham Season 3, it actually starts off, the title episode of Episode 1, I believe, was Better to Reign in Hell. This is the very classic Paradise Lost reference. Better to reign in hell than rule, or I'm sorry, better to rule in hell than reign in heaven. Or I'm getting confused.
It's better
to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Yes, exactly.
Also, Better to Reign in Hell is a great song, Cradle Built.
Yeah, I'm getting all confused. Even though I'm sure my Milton professor would be very disappointed in me. I'm getting tongue tied, but it's actually a pretty classic literary trope, and the general conceit of the literary idea is, would you rather be subservient in paradise, or would you rather reign in your own personal misery or your own personal hell? That particular epic poem sees Satan as an anti-hero rather than the foil of the Christian Bible that everyone knows him as. But I digress. The whole point is, it gets into a little bit of, that is Gotham, gets into the idea of, would you rather basically, I guess, serve lawfulness? Would you rather serve kind of lawfulness? The Penguin's trying to kind of toe the line a little bit, between kind of seeming like a legitimate businessman and being a full-on criminal. This isn't dissimilar to some of the mob elements that we saw in some of the earlier seasons, where it wasn't, you can tell that obviously the cops know that they're bad guys, but they can't really necessarily nail them on anything. And we get the idea that The Penguin is trying to tiptoe the line between, reigning in hell and or serving, the lawful good of the cops, or, actually just being an upstanding businessman. At least that's my take on that. There's probably a few other interpretations from several of the characters in the show, specifically with Fish Mooney. But I'm going to be honest. So the first season of Gotham, it didn't blow me away, and I thought that the second season definitely improved. But the one thing that I can say about Gotham is it is an extraordinarily well made show. Now, that is not necessarily something that's going to put a show into a high rating for me. There are shows that I have seen that have been extraordinarily well made and have been very bad shows. There are shows that I've seen, you'll see these sometimes on lower budget shows on, say, the BBC, that are not extraordinarily well made, but the shows themselves are fantastic. And I think that Gotham kind of falls into the middle tier. It's an extraordinarily well made show, but it's not necessarily an extraordinary show. Now, Eric probably tends to come in a little bit higher on that than I do, but we've seen a few things, and I'll have Eric kind of interject here because he just has a better memory than I do, and it's been so long since I've seen season 2 that my memory does not serve me as well as his does. But so we have the return of, in action, I guess, of Fish Mooney after the events that happened at the asylum of which I'm forgetting the name. Eric, fill it in for me.
Arkham.
Yes, Arkham Asylum. That's the one. No, yeah. So Arkham Asylum made its kind of grander appearance in season 2 in full. I think they might have hinted at it in season 1. I can't remember, but in season 2, and we had the events of one Hugo Strange, right? So he's doing all kinds of scientific experiments, and he's created a bunch of what the Penguin is referring to as monsters. And we're seeing kind of the fruit of his labors in the beginning of season 3. They're kind of making hell in Gotham. We're seeing the fallout of Jim Gordon, no longer being a police officer and dealing with all of that. We're seeing some other fallout of some other characters. And then we got a big transition for one character. So Ivy, the character of Ivy, they decided to do something that I'll have Eric comment on, just because I don't feel like I'm as well versed in this show, simply because I watch it so sporadically in large chunks. I'll binge watch several episodes at a time and then not watch it for a while. So some things fall out of memory. But the character of Ivy, they decided to have some kind of strange scientific sci-fi reason that she went from being a child to what appears to be I would say a fully grown woman, a girl of maybe 19 or 20. Eric, you want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, sure. I think
kind of the reasons. I mean, kind of the reasons of why. I mean, they've said in several articles, and we can mention those. But yeah, what were your feelings on that? Because I thought it came off as a little odd.
They sound like you're coming in over AM radio right now too. Yeah, I think they want to use Ivy more in the adult sense that she was in the comic books. So they aged her up a little, because Fish has this one guy as a cohort. I think his name was Marv. It's one of Hugo Strange's experiments. He can age someone by touching them, and he didn't touch Ivy for too long, but enough to age her by a few years. So she's more mature, and I like that she acts more like the Poison Ivy we know. I mean, we're talking spoilers here. She kills a guy who had the kindness to take her in, to lend her some clothes from, I believe, who he said was his dead wife, and she murders him because he didn't water his plants. That is very much in keeping with Ivy. I like what we've seen of Maggie Geha. I think that's how you pronounce her last name. I hope it is. I mean, I've never met anyone with that last name before, but she really did like my review for the first couple episodes. So it was cool to see her share it around social media. It's just the thing with Ivy is I wonder how they're also going to play it, because while she is physically older, you have to think she didn't have those 5 years or so to mature mentally. So in essence, she's still mentally a child in a way. So maybe they'll play into it, or maybe they'll just completely gloss it over. But I mean, unlike Claire Foley, who played the younger Ivy, Maggie Geha is actually part of the principal cast. So she's there for basically the whole season,
Right.
as it were. Let's just hope that they don't. Let's just hope they don't forget about her like they did with Crispus Allen, Renee Montoya, and more recently Harvey Dent. Because the thing with Gotham is just because you have it, and let me backtrack for a second here. As much as I am liking it so far, and as much as I liked season 2 over an okay season 1, Gotham's problem remains that just because you have access to every toy in the box doesn't mean you have to play with them all at once. Now, Smallville was a slow burn over 10 seasons, and of course, they introduced more elements toward the end because Clark was proto Superman. But Gotham wants to throw every villain at you from the outset. Bruce is like 14 right now. And let's be honest, Batman does not put on cape and cowl until he's 25. And this show is not going to run for another 11 seasons. So our situation mid-season with Renee Montoya and Crispus Allen, they were just forgotten about. And then Harvey Dent, who they had here and there toward the latter portion of season 1, they decided to bring him on as a series regular for season 2 in it because they didn't have any storylines for him. They just, I think they came to realize that they kind of perhaps made a mistake there. And I mean, that doesn't mean we won't see Nicholas D'Agosto again in the future, or unless his contract's over and he was jaded and said, hey, I was under contract for a year, you didn't use me, and I missed out on various other projects I could have taken. I mean, that has to make any actor unhappy. So it's all a matter of balance, because Gotham, they have to stick to their strengths, and getting more character driven is the way to go, as opposed to the police procedural that season 1 was. I mean, as I stressed in my review, this is called Gotham, not Gotham Central, and I think it actually piqued people's interest more so when we got more of the supervillains. So what they need to do is find the right balance of characters, because as much as I like season 2, Gotham can't pull off a truly great season finale because they have to tie up so many plot threads. And I could see it still being the case because they're also implying that Fish Mooney and Hugo Strange will be huge factors going forward, and they're not part of the principal cast. I mean, Jada Pinkett Smith used to be, but now she's credited as special guest star, and BD Wong is guest star. So I do want to see more of Ivy. I have an impression she'll be the best live action Poison Ivy. I mean, all we've had really to compare her to is Uma Thurman, and that, who honestly didn't set a really high bar, but we can probably blame a variety of factors for Batman and Robin, not just her. She was just probably given direction, okay, this is how you want to play Ivy. But yeah, I've been rambling for a bit, so.
Yes, indeed. You're a professional rambler, Eric. No, that's That's fine. You said a lot of things that I wanted to touch on as well, so that just will keep us from repeating ourselves. But one thing that I did want to touch on was the fact of, well, not the fact, but the overall perception of season 3 going forward. One thing that I'll say is, yes, although season 2 did happen to fix some of the, I guess, narrative problems of season 1, they took it away from simply the pure procedural elements, like you stated, and they kind of got into the more grandiose mythos elements, or I guess you could call them, the canonical elements, that we know from the Batman mythos, and they brought those out. Mythology tends to take a big place in these shows. So, an example, in Smallville, we had a lot of the Superman mythology that ended up being brought out over the course of 10 seasons. We're only 3 seasons in now, with only a couple episodes down in season 3, and we've already opened up a lot of that mythos, and it leaves a question as to where they're going to go next, like you stated. But even with the successes of season 2 in terms of changing some of the way that the narrative played, and changing the way that the story was told, to kind of fix some of those narrative problems, I still see some problems going forward. I felt like episode 1 and 2, which are the only ones that we've seen so far, were just kind of all over the map. And I wanted to discuss some of the ratings, specifically. So I don't know if this is actually new specifically to most Wikipedia entries, but you can see, for the most part, accurate information about ratings information on Wikipedia. And they've now started to include DVR views as added on to total viewers and millions. And they also have the ratings share as well. But the show has gone precipitously down in viewers since the season 1, which, absolutely topped out at like 14.15 specifically million views. At the end of season 1, even with DVR views, it was down to 7.57. And then from there, we've seen a precipitous drop till at the end of season 2, 5.5. Now the DVR views aren't in yet on the first couple episodes of season 3. But so far we've got 3.9 and 3.5 million. Now it looks like if history repeats itself, the show is basically getting about anywhere from 2 to 3 million views on DVR. So those are probably the diehard fans, aren't watching it live. Do you see this show lasting more than maybe another couple seasons specifically on Fox, Eric?
Well, I've said it on this show before, I believe, and I'm sticking to my guns, that Gotham will last 3 to 5 seasons. I'm hoping it lasts long enough to bring Jerome back, because we have to establish him as the definitive Joker in this universe. And the producers have said he's coming back, so they're going to start to set it up later in the season. So we need it to survive for that long. But Gotham is not going to have the longevity of a Smallville, because also you're on Fox, and many of us have said, how long is it until the show gets foxed, as it were, or canceled? Because unless you're Bones or House, really, what live action shows have they let go for seasons in recent memory? There was 24, and they bring back some shows for limited engagements, such as 24, X-Files, and now, thankfully, Prison Break. But Gotham also, I also still don't like the time slot, because 2 seasons in a row it's competing with Supergirl, and I believe Supergirl still gets more viewers than Gotham, even though Supergirl doesn't get as many as it did when it began its run. But as it started to move on. Yeah, it still draws more viewers than Gotham, and I really think Supergirl's going to hit its stride with season 2. I mean, season 1 was good for the most part, promising, and disappointments in some spots. But now Supergirl also has the added interest that it's now in the Arrowverse. And it's going to be crossing over with Arrow, Legends of Tomorrow, The Flash. So now, if you're in for the other 3 DC shows, Supergirl's now a can't miss. So that can only hurt Gotham. I mean, granted, Fox has 4 other nights a week they can move Gotham to, but they also have other shows they're really trying to back now that just premiered, like Lethal Weapon. I'm not going to say The Exorcist because they stuck that at Friday nights at 9 p.m. So I don't see that lasting very long. And then Empire is going to have its feet firmly planted Wednesday nights because that's been a big hit for Fox for the past few years. So that's not going anywhere. But I ultimately think Gotham needs to switch to a 9 o'clock slot at another night during the week, or just swap slots with Lucifer. But Lucifer is also a DC Comics show. Granted, it's Vertigo, but it's still DC. And I don't know. It's Fox really painted themselves into a corner. So.
Yeah. To add on to that, it's like, you know, we've talked about this in several other shows with our friends over at the Culture Junkies, and I know there's a couple guys over there specifically. I think Sean has definitely indicated that, you know, it's kind of like, why are we getting a Gotham show without a Batman? And it's a valid question, and we kind of get the idea of why they wanted to do it, but I think Sean and Chris both have kind of stated, and they can correct me on this if I'm wrong. They both stated it's like, okay, if you're going to do a Gotham show without Batman, then don't have Bruce Wayne in it. Why have Bruce Wayne in it? And I can't disagree with some of the points that they're making. I understand it's kind of, this is Batman begins. You know, this is Bruce Wayne before he's even fully made the decision to kind of have the I am vengeance, I am the night, and mentality to completely deliver his life over to fighting of crime. And though we talked about when we first saw the first season of Gotham, that specifically the acting of Mazuz kind of came across as a man who absolutely had already made the decision emotionally that this is what he was going to do. There's some questions that I have as far as just, I feel like the show has never nailed down tonally what it wants to be. And we mentioned 2 shows, House, we mentioned Bones. So we're talking about one show that I believe is still on the air, Bones, that went for, I think it's in its 12th season now, which is just insane. And I believe House ran for 7 seasons, technically 8 that were broken into 2 parts, season 7, I believe. But none of those shows drop below about 8 million views is one thing that's important to note. And we're talking about a show that has not broken 8 million views since the middle part of, or I'm sorry, since the end part of the first season. And that's a significant difference. I mean, when we're talking about a show that's, you know, not quite making 6 million views in total, it's only in its 3rd season. It doesn't seem to have the staying or lasting power. I'm really questioning whether or not this show might make it another season after this one. If it gets a 4th season, I think I'd be surprised. And if I'm a betting man, if it gets another season, the 4th will be its absolutely last. But if I had to put money on it now, I'd say I'm going about 70-30 that it probably won't get a 4th season. I don't know that I'm going to be right. And yeah, you've pretty much said from the get-go that you thought it was going to be between around 3 and 5 seasons. I mean, is Gotham just too weird of an animal to? Has it just not found its voice yet? I mean, are we going to see one of the rare shows that kind of comes into its total fruition at the end of season 3 or in the middle of season 3 and has a renaissance.
What I'm going to stress in saying that even though I have valid complaints about Gotham, and you're probably wondering, hey Eric, how could you have given it 4 out of 5 stars? It's because I liked the performances, I liked what was offered, the atmosphere, the production. When you're grading the first episode or two of a season, I think one of the things you're really looking at is the groundwork that it's laying, so to speak. And I think Gotham season 3 has laid a very promising groundwork. Now, like I said, when we get to the end of 22 episodes, and if they have too many threads to tie up in the season finale, yeah, we may not look back on season 3 as fondly, or maybe say like, hey, it was a great season, but the finale sucked. These are all factors to consider. I like I said, I liked the parts that were there in the first 2 episodes. I still really think that they're going for really stressing the villains. I think Mad City is a progression of Rise of the Villains and Wrath of the Villains from season 2. We're seeing how these people's influence really bleed over into the city as a whole, kind of permeating the public consciousness and how it's influencing them. And this is going to get so out of control, it's going to need a Batman. I know it's a reverse of what we expect because Batman usually is a magnet for the freaks, but like I said in my review, it's time we accept Gotham as its own beast and that it's reassembling the parts to get to the same whole, as it were. I just, like I said, they're just juggling too many themes. I did outright state in my review that it's not quite clear where this season's going as a whole, other than establishing the Court of Owls, who seem to be the big bad. Because usually when you watch any superhero show these days, the first 1 or 2 episodes give you a clear-cut idea. Okay, this is the tone of the season. This is the main villain. This is with Arrow. You know where the flashbacks are going to take place for the year. Like season 5, we know it's going to deal with Oliver's background in the Bratva in Russia. These are things that Gotham needs to establish more, and it seems like they're doing whatever they can to delay Jim Gordon's rise in the GCPD. Because what was this, like the 3rd time he's lost his job now? You also paint yourself into a corner with having Bruce too young. They should have skipped forward a few years after his parents were murdered, or even, since they like changing the canon so much, they could have had his parents murdered when he was like 16, just so he could make just so they could make the Bruce Wayne character more identifiable for some audiences. Because with Smallville, we didn't join Clark until he was 14. Therefore, you had the family show, but we could all watch no matter what age you were, because we've all been through high school. Those currently in high school, they can identify with, hey, this guy's having a hard time to adjust. You feel like an outsider, he feels like an outsider. It creates a familiarity. And then we eventually got to the point where Clark was an adult and started going on adventures. And Gotham can't do that until David Mazouz is 18, and the show's probably going to be gone by then. They've flat out stated they're not going to do any time jumps, but eventually they're going to do a time jump, because I'm thinking there's going to be some kind of montage in the last 5-10 minutes of the series that shows Bruce becoming Batman. They're just going to have to do that. But yeah, like I said, it's just various ways they painted themselves into a corner. Gotham is an enjoyable show. I'm not going to deny that. It's middle of the pack for DC shows for me, but I really look forward to watching it week to week. It's just a very strange beast. I just hope that they're able to pull it all together. Am I making sense?
Yeah, the problem is that I think that you're making about as much sense out of what we're given with the show as you can. Now I will say this, and this may seem kind of like a non sequitur, but when we were discussing reviews and ratings of Batman versus Superman as an example, we gave our various ratings, and they were higher than some of our other friends in the nerd culture, and one of the reasons that I was kind of so surprised at some of the people's ratings of the movie was that when I broke it down into its individual parts, it really was rated highly as far as all of the various elements. And I think that there is, when you take all of the elements that make for a good TV show or a good movie, and you put them all together, there is kind of I guess, another invisible element as to whether all of those things mesh well together, that it itself must be rated. And I think maybe moving forward, I'm going to try to kind of invoke that in some of our ratings. But, if I had to rate the show on production quality, it would get probably a 9 or a 10. It's one of the best produced shows on television. It looks beautiful all the time. It's super well shot. There's just so many things that the show nails. Now, as far as the acting, I do feel like the acting can be a little hit or miss. I feel sometimes like characters try too hard. I'm looking at you, Fish Mooney, aka Pete's. The actress's name is escaped. Jada Pinkett Smith. Can you say overacting? It's like Jim Carrey's Riddler. I know that that's how he was directed to be, but he was also basically be Jim Carrey. I feel like for every actor who plays Alfred, or for David Masood who plays Bruce Wayne, or even for the Jim Gordon, for every actor that really nails the role, or the was it Robin Lord Taylor? I can't remember.
Robin Lord Taylor,
the Penguin. He absolutely chews up the scenery. And then there are some scenes where I'm kind of like, okay, he's really overplaying his hand here. I feel like some of them are all over the map, but the acting is generally solid. It's generally solid. It fails, though, in a few other points. I think it fails in terms of, plot. Sometimes the lines are plotting. Sometimes the plot doesn't seem to move along the way that I feel like it should. And in more so than that, when you put all those elements together, they don't seem to gel or mesh, for me specifically, as much. There's a reason. I'll give you an example. I don't miss episodes of, say, The Walking Dead when it comes out. I don't miss episodes of Game of Thrones from week to week. These are shows that keep me on the hook week to week, and I'm going to watch them live if I absolutely can, and if not, I'm going to watch them maybe later that night, or I'm going to watch them the following day if I absolutely can't get to it. But this is a show that I'm happy to let sit by the wayside and then just binge up a little bit later. Binge 4 or 5 episodes and then do that a couple times a season. That never happens to me with, I think, shows that are really, really great. I would say specifically not in their 3rd season. Yes, I kind of started watching Supernatural in chunks, but I love that show. But now we're in season 11. Okay, certain things.
Well, starting.
This is true. Starting season 12. So this is the kind of binge watching that's indicative of streaming culture. But I think that it's also indicative that the ratings. The fact that I'm a comic book fan and it's not hooking my attention as much as it should be. The fact that there's just things that don't gel. If the show does not really hit its stride in this season, I do think it's over. And you know what? I'm not going to say they deserve it, but we've longed for since the days of Smallville. I know that we've talked about it, and I know that a lot of fans have talked about wanting it. Batman, the development of Batman would be the most perfect television show that we've ever seen. You give us a show like Batman that's basically him becoming the Bat, similar to Smallville, and that show would get so many viewers. It would be absolutely absurd. I think it would blow away Arrow. I think it would probably blow away The Flash. It'd probably blow away Supergirl, and it'd probably blow away Gotham as well. I just, I was really, the show had a lot of promise. I mean, specifically Bruno Heller, the creator. I know he says he's not a huge fan of comic books necessarily, but the man has made two of my favorite shows of all time, Rome and The Mentalist. And I really expected a lot from him. And I just don't feel like the show's delivered on, I think, the premise that a lot of us thought it was going to deliver on. But if I'm rating season 3 going forward so far, I'd give it a 3 out of 5. I'd maybe give it a 3.5 at the absolute most. And that's if I am rating it, just for the sum of its parts. If I'm not giving it that extra, it factor element rating, I'd say it might get a 3.5. But with that element in there, I'd say it gets knocked down to a 3. The show is not as good as the sum of its parts, which it's a really, really well made kind of mess, in my humble opinion. But Eric said he wasn't going to give his rating.
So basically, 3 out of 5, that converts to a 6 out of 10, which is pretty much in keeping with what you've been saying. But before we move on to talking Rebirth, I just want to say, if we're talking dream TV shows, we're never going. I don't think we're ever going to get that kind of Batman show, because we got this one. I mean, now we're getting a Krypton show. If Sci-Fi gives the pilot a series order, they're just mining Superman's history all they can. But we'll never get the pre-Batman Bruce Wayne series now, because Gotham had its chance. But my dream series would just be a straight up Batman show on TV. And we're talking the dark, serious Batman. But as we know with shows like Arrow, The Flash, etc., you can develop his character more. You can develop Nightwing, Batgirl, others. You can get into more villains that you don't have time to do in movies until we got to Suicide Squad and they finally brought in Harley Quinn, Killer Croc, etc., Deadshot. But there's so much more you could do with 22, 23 episodes of Batman. And I hope I get a show like that in my lifetime. It's just, it can't happen right now because of the movies, and it's logically going to have to happen after the superhero bubble bursts at movie theaters, which is probably going to be in about 5-6 years. But at the same time, it's going to burst on television as well due to overexposure. And
it's practically criminal that it hasn't happened already. I mean, we've had a Superman show on television, with the exception of now. We basically have had a Superman show on television for the last 25 years.
Yeah.
Or some variation of Superman in cinema.
Yeah, because we had the George Reeves show in the 50s, Adventures of Superman, but we had Superboy for 4 years. Shortly after that, we had it followed by Smallville. Shortly after that, that was followed by Supergirl. But I mean, even though Superman's not the
fantastic Lois and Clark, of course.
Oh yeah, Lois and Clark. Yeah, without Lois and Clark, there's a big gap between Superboy and Smallville. But the fact is, even though, Smallville technically not Superman. Well, Superboy really delved into the mythology, but Smallville delved deep into the mythology. Supergirl, though she's the title character, it's very much still a Superman universe show, and Batman always gets the sweet end of the deal when it comes to animation on TV, and Superman gets it when it comes to live action television. And I want to see that Batman television show in my lifetime, but it's probably not going to come for quite a while after this current bubble bursts, and eventually someone's like, we really need something for our primetime block. Batman hasn't been on the big screen for some time. Let's do a TV show with him.
Yeah.
It's going to have to be that. And that's probably going to be like by 2030 or something.
Yeah, the fact that we've had Arrow, the fact that we've had the Flash, the fact that we've had Smallville, Supergirl, Agents of Shield, Daredevil, the fact that we've had this litany of superhero shows in the modern era with special effects, we know that making a Batman show would not be a difficult thing to do. I mean, they could absolutely knock it out of the park if they can really cast someone who can really do it. But okay, let's move on. I think we beat that dead horse until the end of time. So we're a little over half. We went over on our Gotham talk more than we wanted to. So Rebirth titles in September. Now we wanted to go over the new title Trinity, which is a brand new title. It's never had a Trinity title before in DC's history. There was a Trinity miniseries by Matt Wagner, I think a 3-part miniseries of collected books, trade paperbacks, as it were. And we're going to talk Teen Titans, not to be confused with Titans. And we're going to talk Cyborg. And last but not least, my mind is slipping, Eric.
We'll be talking Batman Beyond as well, but
Batman Beyond. Yeah.
Also, don't forget to point out there was a weekly series, Trinity. But
yes, there was a weekly series, Trinity, but not to be confused with that.
I think this is the first time. Yeah, there's an ongoing monthly.
Yeah, this is the first time we've got an ongoing monthly. So, tell you what, I'm gonna jump in and go over. Let's do Trinity. It's the biggest one, I would say, to come out of the month, in my opinion. You can correct me if you think I'm wrong. I thought it was fantastic. I love Francis Manapul. I have heard rumors, Eric, that apparently he's not going to be continuing art on the series after issue 1. Is this true?
I forgot the solicits, but as of issue 3 or 4, he's not doing art. I can't remember if it's number 2. Okay. But yeah, I know Clay Mann is drawing number 4. I can't remember if he's doing number 3, but it kind of seems like a cheat.
It's kind of a cheat if it's not.
Yeah, because you get one of the best, most distinctive artists, not just at DC, but in the whole industry right now. And this is a guy I remember when I think our first time both seeing him with DC was when he did a couple issues of Superman Batman in like 2009 or something like that, right? Was that your first exposure?
I believe so. And then there was also Adventure Comics with Superboy.
Yeah, I think you even told me like you were in the car with your brother-in-law one day and you guys were looking at that issue of Superman Batman. You were like, wow, this guy's really good. I mean, I hope we see more of him. And then, of course, he was one of those guys. He just blew up and went on to do bigger things. I mean, he defined the Flash in the New 52. He drew some beautiful issues of Detective Comics. He did a few issues of Justice League when Jeff Johns was doing the Dark Side War. And by the way, as of now, I still have a review up for Justice League Volume 8, Dark Side War Part 2 up at Dark Knight News if you want to check it out. That was a very good book. But yeah, to have Francis Manapul on a book and have him writing it only just does not seem right. It's like it would be like having David Finch writing a book but not drawing. And I mean, that kind of happened at one point when he was writing the pre-52 Batman the Dark Knight, which lasted 5 issues. But I mean, as good as Jason Fabok is, and he did like the final 2 issues of that, it's still when David Finch is on the book, you want to see
David Finch is there.
that guy. Yeah, you want to see that guy drawing, and it's just weird. I don't know. Is Manipul behind? Trinity is going to be a monthly, not a twice monthly like many of the books are right now. So I'm wondering if there's a different project. Is he actually finally working on Aquaman Earth One, which was announced, I believe, at San Diego Comic Con 2015? We've heard nothing about it since. I'm not going to get into it here, but I'm wondering if the Earth One line is being silently canceled because there's no news on it lately. I mean, granted, they just came out with another volume of Teen Titans, but there's nothing said to be released next. I mean, they said Paquette and Morrison are working on another volume of Wonder Woman, but still, it's and okay. Yes, I am getting on the topic now.
You're really getting on a tangent here.
Okay, but I just have to say, Batman Earth One was supposed to have like 2 more volumes, and now Jeff Johns is preoccupied with movies and television. So is that story never going to get finished because it was awesome? But okay, yeah, Trinity was an awesome book, and it played it very small and got to the core of Bruce Wayne and Diana Prince getting to know this Clark Kent from another universe and his family. And it's all them really getting to know each other. And I think Poison Ivy's actually supposed to be the first villain they face in the series, but Manipul gives hints on the cover art of #1. So we should probably expect the likes of Lex Luthor, Doomsday, the Joker to show up soon. But it's really there's no coincidence in its timing that it's out the same year as Batman versus Superman, which featured all 3 of these characters. But I think Manipul is going to nail it from a writing standpoint, which writers turned artists don't always do,
right?
Which I might touch on later in this episode. But it was an incredible issue. So do you have any other thoughts on Trinity?
Yeah, I thought it was incredible. I mean, I agree with you that it's kind of like having Francis Manipul, one of the best working artists in comic books, and definitely one of the most distinctive. And every book that he's worked on has been successful, and done really well. Having Francis Manipul only write it is kind of like having Usain Bolt hand out the water bottles to the sprint, to the long distance runners. It's not like he's not contributing to the team, but that's just, you feel like that's not his forte. He's there to run those 100-meter dashes, and I can't say though. I'm if his writing is consistent with what we've seen in issue 1. I might just be happy to see Francis Manipul the artist or Francis Manipul the writer. I was really impressed by the book. It had a lot of that heart and feel that some of the issues that he actually did illustrate of Adventure Comics did when he was doing Superboy in Smallville. It kind of had that homey, personal feeling. I would say not dissimilar to some of the things that we saw in, say, Superman for All Seasons, or some of the work that was done on Secret Origin of Superman by, I believe that was by Johns. If the story continues as it is, it's definitely, it's interesting, it's intimate, and we know this guy can draw and hopefully write some of the great action pieces that we've seen in other books. But yeah, that I would say, for a first issue of an ongoing, I'd probably give that one about a 4.5 out of 5, if not a 5 out of 5. What about you, Eric?
Well, as you know, unless I'm over, we got this covered. I like to do things on a scale of 10, but I think our reviewer over at DKN, John Hagman, I believe he gave Trinity a 9, and I would say that's about right. I didn't think it was totally perfect, but
it wasn't a totally perfect book. I mean, it left a little bit to be desired from when we see the Trinity get together and we don't see even the littlest bit of action. It wasn't their most perfect interactions. It was very much these characters are kind of meeting for the first time, which they are. But yeah, I would give it about a 9 out of 10. But all right, so moving on. How about we do Cyborg? That one's really fresh in my brain. I read that one today, and both the Rebirth #1 and Cyborg #1. That book really impressed me. I think that Cyborg's always been a secondary character, not only on the Titans, but even in the Justice League. He's there as supporting. He's there as support, and he's just never been a dynamically unique character. And when I say dynamic and unique, I mean he's obviously unique. His power set is unique for the most part in the DC universe, but they've never got into his personal story more than we knew that it was okay. Victor Stone was injured to the point of death, and then his father essentially turns him into the cyborg through science. I think that when we really got into in the first couple issues, the Rebirth title and the proper #1, we get the idea that Cyborg, a little bit of spoiler territory, but it gives you the general theme of the book, is when Victor Stone's father made him into the cyborg, did he remain Victor Stone, or was he replaced with something that is both machine and human, but not still quite human? Or is he just the best recreation of his son that he could possibly make through technology? And it gets into some of the existential questions of kind of could an AI have a soul, which is a very classic sci-fi question. These are the philosophical questions that we see in things like Star Trek and in good sci-fi. I think that book had a lot of heart, and I was really impressed with it. I thought that the art was good. I think that I really liked that they were getting into the personal story of Victor Stone. I thought it was an interesting take on the cyborg character, and his big bad apparently appears to be maybe a roadblock in the way of answering that question. Is Victor Stone still Victor Stone that he was before he became the cyborg? Is Victor Stone still human, or is he become something more than human? His big bad that's been revealed so far kind of throws a question into that mix that we don't quite know the answer to yet. But I look forward to more from that book, and I'd say I'd probably give it a solid 8 out of 10. What was your thoughts on Cyborg, Eric?
This current volume of Cyborg is a little like Gotham. I think it's a bit of a strange beast because I don't quite know what to think of it yet. I will say that even though we've only read 2 issues, it doesn't grab me like the previous volume of Cyborg did. Just ended its run over the summer. I thought that was a bit more fun and made interesting use of Cyborg's power set, especially when Marv Wolfman jumped on. But the Rebirth one shot was it focused a lot on the machine side of him, but I just remember sitting down to read it and it didn't quite grab me until you got to the cliffhanger, and it's like it's one of those cliffhangers where you have to know where things are going to go. And then Cyborg #1 itself, the first proper issue, was okay. It focused way more on his human side. I think going forward, each individual issue needs to find the right balance. It is a little more somber, and it does deal with these deep philosophical questions. But as I said, it's all about balance. I will say that if you're from Detroit, there are things you're going to like in the series because they name drop locales and the stuff, and Victor Stone is actively living in Detroit. So it's a series I want to continue to read, but I don't. It has to really prove itself if I want to stick with it in the long run, and especially how they want to push Cyborg with him now being on the big screen and eventually getting his own solo movie. You're really going to have to make sure that his title is worthy of that AAA status. And again, getting into it with the art, we were promised Will Conrad on interiors, and he gave us a really awesome cover, Cyborg #1. There's no doubting that, but where's Will Conrad? I'm hoping he's at least on for issue #2. But I don't know. For me, Cyborg right now, I'd probably give it like a 7. Not bad, but I'm not being blown away. Like earlier this summer, I read an issue of Cyborg from Wolfman, and I just thought I was like, this issue needs to have some influence on the eventual Cyborg movie. I think it was Cyborg #10 or 11. It's whichever one he was when he was in need of repair and he needed to remotely save a plane that was being hijacked or something like that. So, okay, you want to move on to which title now?
Yeah, let's do. How about we do Teen Titans and then we'll do Batman? Yeah. So Teen Titans was kind of an interesting title. I'll say right off the bat, I wasn't super impressed with it. First things first, I've never read a ton of Teen Titans. They've never been, by any stretch of the imagination, near my favorite team up in terms of the characters that they have. This is a slightly different iteration of the Teen Titans, but it's got some of the basic core members. And you can help me run down the list if I miss anybody. But we have Beast Boy, Raven. We have Starfire, and who else am I missing, Eric?
We have Kid Flash and then Damian Wayne Robin.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, Kid Flash and then Damian Wayne. So one of the things that I think kind of there's a little bit of a mystery going on in the first issue, that is the Rebirth #1 issue, and I think that one of the problems is that when you introduce a kind of a mystery in the very first issue, there kind of has to be a little bit of a payoff if there's going to be a last page reveal. And I think there was a pretty strong payoff, but the characters themselves didn't appeal to me particularly. And granted, they are the Teen Titans. I think that they tried to push way more distinctly than I thought was necessary. Is, you know, when I hear teenager, specifically if we're thinking about, you know, teenage superheroes, you don't necessarily think about immaturity, or at least I don't, you know, and you know, I read a story about a guy who's, you know, I think he, you know, is 9 years old and just started college today in real life. You know, there are incredible people who have reached a level of maturity that is far beyond their years, you know, their trips around the sun, as it were. And I felt like the superheroes in the Teen Titans would have more of a maturity. They really kind of press the fact that these are kids and that they have issues. You know, Beast Boy's dealing with some of his issues, and Raven's dealing with some of hers. And the only one who really appealed to me was Starfire, because her story sounded interesting. She's dealing with potentially trying to stop a sex slavery ring, you know, because she herself was once a slave. That's a very interesting concept. And the Kid Flash was kind of interesting. He's looking for redemption. I also like the fact that he had shaved a lightning bolt into his hair. I mean, I don't know why that's the first person who's thought of that, but you know, it was a nice little touch. I just wasn't. The book in and of its whole was not appealing to me particularly. I don't necessarily look forward to the next book. The last page reveal was kind of interesting, but also not shocking. But overall, I'd probably give the book about a 6 out of 10.
Now, personally, I see it as it was a lot of setup. It's obviously creating a bridge between the New 52 series that just ended and the Rebirth title. I mean, this so far all that's shipped is a one shot, and the actual Teen Titans #1 ships at the end of October. This was really about getting the team together, and Damian Wayne's doing it by force. Um, but I think it has a lot of potential. I'm not a Teen Titans fan per se, but I was really digging what I was reading, and I think DC needs stronger team up books right now, and this might be it. I wouldn't doubt if by the end of the year I'm saying this is DC's best team up book. Because Titans, as much as I liked it, and we stressed Titans being a different book by Dan Abnett and Brett Booth, started out well, but it's still good, but it's not like mind blowing in a sense. And I've been liking Suicide Squad, but Justice League is starting to suck, and it's like I'm only reading Justice League just because it's Justice League right now. Um, it's a case of artists writing. You got Brian Hitch just writing that series as opposed to drawing it. Um, so I'm Teen Titans has a great creative creative team on it, I should say. You got Benjamin Percy, who's just been on target with Green Arrow lately, and then John Boy Myers. I really love his style. I think I just quoted or nearly quoted Winston in the first Ghostbusters movie when they were talking about the end of days in Ecto 1. But I think John Boy Myers could possibly be like the next Francis Manapul. I mean, DC has a few of these guys coming up because I really like what Brian Sheen is doing over on Supergirl right now. And John Boy Myers caught my eye. He did an issue of Adventures of Supergirl earlier this year, and I was like, I want to see more of this guy. And then when I found he's on a monthly, I I was happy. And Teen Titans tends to be a book they stick people on who are just kind of coming up. So I could definitely see John Boy Myers getting some bigger titles uh, in the coming years, as long as he maintains this level of quality. But we've got Ra's al Ghul's going to be the main villain for the first arc, so we're going to explore that family relationship between he and Damian. So I think there's a lot going on with Teen Titans, and nobody should take their eyes off it anytime soon. Um, yeah, I would probably give at least this one shot an 8. But you want to take Batman Beyond first?
Yeah. So frankly, I was just going to comment that I did think the art was quite good, and his style indeed did remind me of some of Manapul's stuff. I am looking forward to more from him. I don't want to dismiss everything about the book outright, indicating that it was bad. I think more stylistically with the tone in the narrative, it was more of where my problems lie. But anyway, last but not least, Batman Beyond. So it's a Batman title ostensibly, although it's not the Batman that everyone knows and loves necessarily. But this is a Batman who's been around now for several years in Terry McGinnis. I really enjoyed Batman Beyond. I thought it was a great one-shot book, and specifically, I thought that obviously them bringing Terry McGinnis back. Now, I have not been reading Batman Beyond, so Eric might have to fill in some of the gaps in my knowledge about. But he'd been taken over by Tim Drake in recent years in the Batman Beyond titles. This is correct, Eric?
Yeah, basically, we know there have been several Batman Beyond miniseries and ongoings since, I think, 2010. And those all followed the cartoon, the Batman Beyond animated series. But after Future's End, they made an actual Batman Beyond comic book within DC continuity proper, and it was Tim Drake. And again, this is continuity proper, but it's Terry McGinnis. But you see them. Uh, there's kind of nods to he becomes Batman the same way he does in the cartoon, but it's still in keeping with DC continuity, and it's going to be interesting to see how they balance it out going forward. Um, Basically, this one shot that came out lets you know all the basics of Terry McGinnis, and you can just jump right in without having read the previous volume, I'd say. But I,
Yeah, I think that was a strength. I think that was a strength of the book in terms of, making it very similar to the animated series. If you've seen the Batman Beyond animated series, which I really enjoyed, a lot of Batman the animated series fans enjoyed. I think you don't really need to go in with a primer of those previous books. But I thought it was pretty strong. They definitely had one of those kicker cliffhanger endings that makes you really want to see where they're going to go from here. But the overall premise is, Terry McGinnis being Batman in future Neo Gotham, trying to deal with the fact that both of his parents are dead. He's raising, I guess, or helping to raise his little brother. His girlfriend from the series, animated series, and him have been kind of on the outs. And those things are interesting while trying to contend with the same group of bad guys that killed his father in the animated series, the Jokers. And they're making some really big plays in New Gotham. I think it's a really solid basic premise. I thought it was done well and pulled off well. I thought the art and the storytelling was done very solidly. And again, that kicker cliffhanger ending was enough to get me to come back and want to see more. I would say it's a solid 8 out of 10. That issue. I look forward to more from Batman Beyond.
Oh, for me, it's a tough call, but Batman Beyond was probably my favorite New Rebirth title of September. I really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to seeing more, and that cliffhanger really created this whole legacy with Batman Beyond continuing what had been already established in Batman lore. Because while it's great to get new villains like Ink, Blight, Spellbinder, you kind of want to see what became of everyone else. And this isn't the same thing with the animated series and its return of the Joker movie. So I'm really interested to see where it goes. But yeah, it was just kind of everything you would want from a debut Batman Beyond book. And as I said, very reader friendly. I'd probably give it about a 9. And this is one series I don't think I'll be putting down anytime soon. Did you have a favorite September launch title?
Yeah, I think Trinity seems to be my favorite. I did actually think, like I said, we kind of disagree in terms of quality on, say, Cyborg, Teen Titans, but I thought Cyborg was probably the biggest surprise of September. I didn't expect a whole lot from that book, and I was very pleasantly surprised by it. But I would say that Trinity is probably my favorite. The art, the storytelling was done well. It has the Holy Trinity. Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. I thought the characters were all really well done. Kind of gave us a little bit more insight into the life of this Superman that we haven't seen since the New 52, outside of Superman in Action Comics, as he's playing with the rest of the Justice League, or at least a few other members of the Justice League. I thought it was really, really well done. So Trinity is going to be my #1 of the month.
So basically, we don't have too much time left, but I just kind of, like we've been doing in recent episodes, just give our power rankings of what we think are the best DC titles overall right now. And again, even though Green Arrow had an okay 2-issue interlude story this month, I still think it should be placed at the top of the heap because beginning the next major story arc in October, I think Benjamin Percy is just going to continue to hit home runs. I don't see that book uh, really declining in quality anytime soon. And again, another one of my favorites, The Flash, is still up there. Uh, two really strong issues this month with the Godspeed reveal, and again continues to be just as compelling as the TV show, even though it's a different beast. And then I don't think I can do a top three this month because it's the others are going to be a tie. Red Hood and the Outlaws is still up there for me, but Detective Comics just is really solid, especially the Tim Drake quote unquote death issue. I won't spoil it too much if you haven't read it, but I'll just say he's about as dead as Batman was a few years back in the RIP arc. So don't get too worried about Tim Drake. But yeah, Detective Comics has really ascended, and Action Comics, which I thought slipped in August, that had a hell of a strong comeback with the Superman meet Clark Kent story this month. So that's one I'm continuing to look forward to reading. Um, and otherwise, just to mention some of the other flagships, Superman's really improving. Uh, really, with the regular Batman title, not too impressed. And that's a title I'm kind of just reading because it's Batman. What's funny is that the latest Night of the Monster Men issue, which is just part of a crossover, I thought that was technically the best issue of Batman so far of Rebirth, and that was technically written by Steve Orlando. But I have hopes for Batman going forward with the I Am Suicide arc that starts with #9 next month. But I'm also enjoying Green Lanterns. So, how about your power ranking before we get out of here?
Yeah, they're not too dissimilar. I mean, I will say that I tend to give Batman a little bit more credence than you did. I have thought Batman has been pretty interesting. I've been pretty impressed with Green Lanterns. I didn't know what to expect from that one. I don't know that I like it more than I like Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps, but it has been a pretty good title. A surprisingly good title, kind of like Cyborg. It's surprised me, and it's continuing to surprise me. Arrow has been great. Green Arrow has been a really, really well done book, as well as The Flash. Again, I'm really surprised at All Star Batman. I know that we talked about it off air about a week or so back, and we had said that you weren't completely impressed with it. But again, against every desire I have to not like John Romita's art, I think the story and the art tend to mesh pretty well together. And it reminds me actually a lot of Nightfall. It's kind of, this story of let's push Batman to his breaking point, and it's coming off as pretty interesting. But I have also been enjoying Action Comics. Superman hasn't been as strong of a title, but Action Comics has been very interesting. And I'd say that that's probably the biggest titles on my list of regular reads, and then some of the other titles similar to TV I tend to binge read. So I've been kind of letting other issues like Wonder Woman and even Justice League kind of back up on me, and then I'm kind of reading 2 or 3 issues at a time. But yeah, I've been very impressed with Rebirth, and obviously so have people who go to comic book shops, because it's been doing very well in stores. But why don't we wrap it up, Eric? Why don't you give the folks our credentials and where they can find us, and then I'll take us home.
All right, I will say that in our next episode, we'll probably talk a little more DC TV, and no more Rebirth titles are launching for the remainder of 2016. So in 2017, we will have Justice League of America, Super Sons, Earth 2, and likely several others. But we'll talk comics again in our next episode. There are some mini series launching in October. Are you going to be reading He-Man Thundercats, Josh?
I actually was considering reading He-Man Thundercats, but probably not.
Maybe I'm not. We'll talk that one. We'll have to talk at least one of the mini series that's launching in October, just so we can talk about something new and then give the power rankings. So, yeah, I will plug our sites for all the latest Batman news across all forms of media. Check out darkknightnews.com. For the latest DC news across all forms of media, check out dccomicsnews.com. For our backlog of podcasts and other miscellanea, check out multiverseentertainment.wordpress.com. And then, although it's not affiliated with this podcast, check out wegotThiscovered.com, an awesome entertainment site I write for. And then be sure to check out our friends at culturejunkies.net and to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/podcast for all seasons. So until next time, thanks for listening and goodbye.
It seems like that list of credentials just keeps getting longer and longer, Eric. I think you need to stop working so hard. But no, thanks for joining us, guys, and listening. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll be back probably not as long, seeing as how we're not wrapping up an entire month's worth of books, or trying to, in a single episode. So we should probably be back in a few weeks to talk to you more about some of the upcoming premieres. But thanks for listening, and have a good night.